The words hit like a slap across the face of every decent person within earshot. "Move it, boy! This ain't your neighborhood welfare line." Officer Bradley Hutchinson's snarl echoed off the courthouse marble as he jabbed his nightstick toward a distinguished black man climbing the steps. The man wore pressed khakis and carried a leather briefcase, clearly someone with purpose and dignity. Hutchinson stepped directly into his path, chest puffed out like a schoolyard bully. He grabbed his belt with both hands, rocking back on his heels with a shit-eating grin. "What's in the briefcase, son? Food stamps?" The insult landed like a punch. Bystanders froze. Phones appeared. The black man's knuckles went white around his briefcase handle, but his voice stayed level. "Excuse me, officer." Hutchinson leaned closer, invading his personal space. "Don't officer me, boy. Answer the damn question before I make this really uncomfortable for you. Have you ever seen someone's entire life judged in 10 seconds, not knowing that person was about to become their worst nightmare?" The alarm buzzed at 0530 hours, just like it had for the past 30 years. In his modest Hampton Inn room, Major General Theodore Washington dropped to the carpet for his daily routine, 50 push-ups, 50 sit-ups, followed by stretching that kept his 52-year-old frame moving like a man half his age. The shower water ran hot against muscles that still carried the discipline of 3 decades in uniform. In the mirror, he adjusted his civilian clothes pressed khakis and a navy polo that his late wife Sarah had bought him 2 Christmases ago. "You look distinguished in navy," she'd said, running her fingers along the fabric. The memory still made him smile. 20 minutes later, Washington sat in Dolly's Diner, the kind of place where coffee came in thick white mugs and the waitress called everyone honey. "Bien." The elderly black woman behind the counter noticed something in his posture, the way he sat perfectly straight, the way his eyes swept the room with tactical awareness. "Military?" she asked, refilling his coffee without being asked. "Yes, ma'am. Just visiting family." His voice carried the quiet authority of someone accustomed to being heard the first time. The case file for his nephew Marcus lay open beside his eggs and grits. A minor traffic violation kid ran a red light rushing to his job at the hospital. Good boy who needed someone to vouch for his character. Washington had driven 4 hours from Fort Lee to be that voice. Outside the diner window, Richmond buzzed with Monday morning energy. Lawyers in expensive suits hurried past construction workers grabbing breakfast. The contrast reminded Washington why he'd chosen a life of service to protect all of them, regardless of what they looked like or where they came from. The courthouse loomed 6 blocks away, its 1920s architecture standing like a monument to justice. Or at least, what justice was supposed to look like. Washington had read about the protests here last month. Another young black man roughed up during a routine traffic stop. The familiar knot formed in his stomach. His Honda Civic 10 years old with 180,000 miles sat in the diner parking lot looking exactly like what it was. Reliable transportation for a man who'd rather spend money on his nephew's education than his own image. The trunk held his dress uniform, just in case the court appearance ran formal, but he doubted he'd need it. Across town, Officer Bradley Hutchinson stumbled out of his apartment building, squinting against sunlight that felt like needles in his hungover brain. The empty beer bottles on his passenger seat rattled as he started his patrol car, drowning out the radio chatter about domestic disturbances and fender benders. "Jesus Christ," he muttered, catching his reflection in the rearview mirror. 12 years on the force, and every morning felt like punishment. His partner Murphy, 24 years old, with the eager energy of someone who still believed in protect and serve, climbed into the passenger seat. "Rough night, Brad?" Murphy's voice carried genuine concern that only made Hutchinson more irritated. "Every night's rough when you're cleaning up after these people." Hutchinson jerked the car into traffic, cutting off a sedan driven by a young Hispanic woman. Through her window, he saw her mouth move, probably cursing him in Spanish. The radio crackled with Sergeant Rodriguez's voice. "Unit 47, we've got increased presence requested around the courthouse today. Some high-profile cases have stirred up the community." "Great," Hutchinson said, keying his mic. More babysitting duty. Murphy shifted uncomfortably. In 6 months of partnership, he'd watched Hutchinson's interactions with minority citizens. The pattern was always the same. Immediate suspicion, aggressive questioning, hands hovering near his weapon. Last week, Murphy had tried to bring it up, but Hutchinson shut him down with a glare that could melt steel. At the courthouse, security cameras perched like electronic eagles on every corner. The building's Confederate monument stood nearby, a reminder of old wounds that never quite healed. Local news reporter Sarah Lane adjusted her microphone, preparing for a live shot about budget hearings that nobody would remember by dinner. Washington parked his Civic in the public lot, checking his watch. 30 minutes early, perfect timing to review his testimony and maybe grab another coffee. The briefcase in his passenger seat contained his nephew's character references, his own military credentials, and a sealed envelope marked Pentagon correspondence that he'd need to review later. As he stepped out of his car, the morning sun caught the polished leather of his dress shoes. Every movement spoke of precision, of a man who'd earned respect through decades of service to his country. He had no idea that in less than 10 minutes, none of that would matter to the man with the badge and the attitude problem. General Washington climbed the courthouse steps with measured purpose, his briefcase swinging slightly with each stride. The marble felt solid beneath his feet, the kind of permanence that reminded him why institutions mattered, why justice was worth defending. That's when Officer Hutchinson's voice cut through the morning air like a rusty blade. Well, well, look what we got here. Hutchinson pushed himself off the patrol car where he'd been leaning, his gut straining against his uniform shirt. You lost, boy. The welfare office is 3 blocks away. Washington stopped mid-stride. The word boy hung in the air like smoke from a house fire. He turned slowly, his military training automatically cataloging the Situation 3 officers, growing crowd, multiple exit routes. Excuse me, officer. I have business inside. His voice carried the calm authority of someone who'd faced down enemy fire without flinching. Hutchinson's eyes narrowed behind his aviator sunglasses. He stepped directly into Washington's path, close enough that the stench of stale beer and cheap cologne filled the space between them. Business? What kind of business could somebody like you possibly have in there? The emphasis on somebody like you landed like a physical blow. Bystanders began to slow their pace, sensing trouble brewing. A mother pulled her young daughter closer. An elderly man in a veteran's cap stopped walking entirely. Maybe he's here to confess to something, Collins chimed in, earning a bark of laughter from Hutchinson. Murphy shifted uncomfortably, his hand unconsciously moving to his radio. Something about the black man's bearing. The straight spine, the unwavering eye contact suggested this wasn't going to be their usual easy intimidation. Let me see some ID right now. Hutchinson's command came out as a snarl, his hand resting on his baton. Washington's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Am I under arrest, officer? What's the probable cause? The legal knowledge caught Hutchinson off guard for a split second before his face reddened. Don't get smart with me, boy. I asked for ID, not a law lesson. Brad, maybe we should... Murphy started. Shut it, rookie. Hutchinson's glare could have melted ice. Nobody asked for your opinion. Washington reached slowly into his wallet, his movements deliberate and visible. He pulled out his driver's license and only his driver's license. His military ID stayed hidden behind his credit cards. Hutchinson snatched the license like a hungry dog grabbing meat. Theodore Washington. Fancy name for somebody driving that piece of shit. He pointed toward the Honda Civic with obvious disgust. How'd you even afford that rust bucket? Selling drugs to kids? The accusation hit the growing crowd like electricity. Someone whispered, "That's not right." Another voice murmured, "He hasn't done anything." Washington's hands remained at his sides, but every muscle in his body coiled with controlled tension. "Officer, I don't use drugs. I'm here for legitimate court business." "Sure you are. And I'm the damn president." Hutchinson handed the license to Collins while pulling out his own phone to run the name through the system. "Let's take a walk to your car, Theodore." Time for a little inspection. "Officer, I do not consent to any search." Washington's voice carried the weight of someone who understood constitutional law better than most lawyers. Hutchinson's grin spread like an oil spill. "Consent? Did I ask for consent? I smell marijuana coming from your direction. That's probable cause enough to search whatever I damn well please." The lie was so blatant that several bystanders actually gasped. A teenage girl pulled out her phone and started recording. Then another phone appeared. Then another. "Y'all mind your own business before I find reasons to search all of you, too," Hutchinson barked at the crowd. But the phones kept recording. Washington assessed the situation with military precision. Corrupt officer, escalating situation, innocent bystanders, multiple recording devices. The smart play was compliance under protest, document everything, fight it in court later. "Officer Hutchinson," he said, reading the name tag, "I'm asking you to step back." "You're asking me?" Hutchinson moved closer, invading Washington's personal space until their faces were inches apart. "You don't ask me anything. I'm the one with the badge here, boy." The second use of boy sent ripples through the crowd. Someone shouted, "Leave him alone!" Another voice called out, "He's not doing anything wrong!" Hutchinson keyed his radio with theatrical flourish. "Unit 47 requesting backup for a suspicious individual at the courthouse. Possible drug activity." The radio crackled back. "Nature of suspicion, Unit 47. Individuals acting nervous and evasive. Claims to have business at the courthouse but can't provide adequate explanation." Washington's expression hardened. Every word was a lie, and every lie was being broadcast over official police channels. This wasn't just harassment. This was a deliberate falsification of police records. "Officer, I know my rights. I'm exercising my Fourth Amendment protection against unreasonable search and seizure." "Oh, we got ourselves a jailhouse lawyer." Hutchinson's voice rose to a mocking falsetto. "Let me guess you learned all about the Constitution during your last stretch in prison." The crowd's murmur turned angry. "This is harassment," someone yelled. An elderly black woman stepped forward, her voice sharp with decades of witnessing injustice. "That man is being respectful. You're the one causing trouble." Hutchinson whirled on her. "Ma'am, step back or you'll be joining your friend here for obstruction." Washington held up a calming hand toward the woman. "It's all right, ma'am. Let him do what he's going to do." The calm in his voice only seemed to infuriate Hutchinson more. Here was someone who refused to be intimidated, refused to cower, refused to play the role that Hutchinson's twisted worldview demanded. "Turn around." Hands on the car. Now. Washington looked at the Honda Civic, then back at Hutchinson. "Officer, I'm complying under protest. This is an illegal detention and search. Save it for your public defender." Hutchinson grabbed Washington's arm and spun him around with unnecessary force. The briefcase hit the ground, its contents scattering across the asphalt. As Washington placed his hands on the warm metal of his car roof, Hutchinson began an aggressive pat-down, his hands deliberately rough and invasive. "What's this?" He pulled out Washington's phone, scrolling through it without permission. "That's my phone. I'd prefer if you didn't." "Who are you calling? Your dealer? Your probation officer?" Hutchinson's voice carried the tone of someone enjoying inflicting humiliation. Murphy picked up the scattered papers from Washington's briefcase, his eyes widening as he read the official letterheads. "Brad, you need to see this stuff." "What stuff?" Hutchinson kept one hand on Washington's back while grabbing the papers. His eyes scanned military correspondence, Pentagon letterhead, documents with classification markings. "Stolen valor," he announced loudly, holding up a letter addressed to Major General T. Washington. "Figures. Probably bought this whole setup at a surplus store to impress people." Washington's voice remained steady despite the cuffs pressing into his wrists. "Officer, those are my service documents." "Service?" Hutchinson's laugh was ugly, full of contempt. "You? In the military?" "Right. And I'm General fucking Patton." The crowd had grown to nearly 30 people now. Phones were everywhere, recording every illegal action, every racist comment, every violation of civil rights happening in broad daylight on the courthouse steps. News reporter Sarah Lane had noticed the commotion and was making her way over with her cameraman. "Officers, can you tell us what's happening here?" Hutchinson pretended for the camera like a peacock showing off his feathers. "Routine investigation of suspicious activity. This individual was acting nervous around the courthouse and had what appeared to be stolen military items in his possession." Washington glanced at the camera but remained silent. Everything was being documented now. Every lie, every illegal action, every moment of this travesty was being preserved for the world to see. The phone in the evidence bag began to ring. Then it rang again. Hutchinson ignored it, too caught up in his performance for the news camera to notice that the caller ID read, "Pentagon, Chief of Staff." As the phone continued to buzz with increasing urgency, Washington closed his eyes and took a deep breath. 30 years of military service had taught him patience. Sometimes the best weapon was simply letting your enemy destroy himself. He had no idea how prophetic that thought would prove to be. Hutchinson popped the Honda's trunk with the swagger of a man who believed his badge made him untouchable. Inside lay a military duffel bag, pressed uniforms hanging in garment covers, and an official manila envelope sealed with red wax. Well, well, well. Look what we got here. He pulled out the duffel bag and unzipped it with theatrical flair. "Murphy, come see this amateur hour bullshit." Murphy approached reluctantly, his face already showing doubt. Inside the bag, perfectly folded military utilities, spit-shined dress shoes, and ribbons arranged with precision that spoke of decades of service. The organization was flawless, not the random collection of surplus store items Hutchinson expected. "Brad, this stuff looks really official." Murphy held up a uniform jacket, noting the weight of the fabric, the quality of the stitching. "These aren't knockoffs." Hutchinson snatched the jacket away. "They make good fakes nowadays. Chinese can copy anything." He held it up to the crowd like evidence in a trial. "Stolen valor, ladies and gentlemen. This man's pretending to be a soldier to get sympathy and handouts." Washington's voice cut through the morning air, calm as a lake before a storm. "Officer, those are my service uniforms. I've worn them proudly for 30 years. 30 years? Hutchinson's laughter was harsh, mocking. "What did you serve, boy? Time in county lockup?" The crowd's anger was building like pressure in a boiler. Someone shouted, "This is wrong!" Another voice called out, "Leave that man alone!" But Hutchinson was drunk on his own power now, feeding off the attention. Sarah Lane stepped closer with her cameraman. "Sir, can you state your name for our viewers?" Washington glanced at the camera, then back at Hutchinson. Something in his eyes, a flash of steel beneath the calm surface, made Murphy take an unconscious step backward. "Keep that camera rolling," Washington said quietly. "Document everything." Hutchinson tore open the sealed envelope with the enthusiasm of a child opening Christmas presents. Inside, classified documents bearing Pentagon letterhead, correspondence marked Major General T. Washington, and orders with security classifications that made Murphy's eyes widen. "All fake," Hutchinson announced, waving the papers at the camera. "These computer geeks can make anything look official nowadays. Probably downloaded these templates off the internet." Murphy grabbed one of the documents, studying the official seals, the watermarks, the classification stamps. His police training had taught him to recognize government documentation. Brad, these don't look fake. They look really, really real. Everything's fake with these people, Hutchinson sneered. Fake IDs, fake documents, fake stories about serving their country while real Americans do the bleeding. The racial undertone wasn't subtle anymore. It was a sledgehammer. Several people in the crowd gasped. A veteran in a Marine Corps cap stepped forward, his face red with anger. "Son, you better watch your mouth," the veteran called out. "You're disrespecting every soldier who ever wore the uniform." Hutchinson whirled on him. "You got something to say, old man? Maybe I should search your car, too." Washington's phone, still in the evidence bag, began ringing again. The caller ID clearly showed Pentagon Colonel Mitchell, but Hutchinson was too intoxicated by his own power to notice. "Popular guy," Hutchinson said, holding up the buzzing phone. "Who keeps calling? Your crack dealer wondering where his money is?" "Officer, I really need to answer that call." Washington's voice carried a new urgency, but Hutchinson was beyond listening to reason. "You'll get your phone call at the jail like everybody else." Hutchinson pocketed the phone, cutting off its persistent ringing. "Speaking of which..." He pulled out his handcuffs with the flourish of a magician, revealing his grand finale. The metal caught the sunlight, glinting like a promise of humiliation. "Theodore Washington, you're under arrest for theft of government property, impersonating a military officer, and obstruction of justice." The crowd erupted. "No! This is bullshit. He didn't do anything." But Hutchinson was lost in his moment of triumph, deaf to everything except his own voice. "Turn around. Hands behind your back. Now." Washington looked at the handcuffs, then at the crowd of people recording everything. His nephew Marcus was waiting inside the courthouse, probably wondering where his uncle was. 30 years of military service had taught him when to fight and when to endure. "Officer, I am not resisting arrest, but I am stating for the record that this is a false arrest based on racial profiling. Save your speeches for the judge." Hutchinson grabbed Washington's arm and spun him around with unnecessary force. The handcuffs clicked shut around his wrists, tight enough to bite into skin, tight enough to leave marks. "How's that feeling, General?" Hutchinson's voice dripped with sarcasm. "Getting a little taste of real justice?" Washington winced as the metal cut into his wrists. "Officer, these cuffs are too tight." "They'll get looser when you get to your cell." Yet Hutchinson tested the cuffs with a sharp tug that made Washington's shoulders strain. "Maybe then you'll remember to show some respect to real law enforcement." The crowd was becoming a mob. Angry voices rose from every direction. "This is 2025, not 1925. Somebody call the FBI. That man's rights are being violated. This is exactly why people don't trust the police." Hutchinson basked in the chaos like a dictator reviewing his troops. "Y'all can record all you want. This is what happens when people think they can disrespect law enforcement." Murphy stood frozen, watching his partner destroy a man's dignity on live television. Every instinct told him this was wrong, but 12 years of police culture had taught him that snitches didn't survive in blue uniforms. "Brad," he whispered urgently, "maybe we should call a supervisor." "I am the supervisor here." Hutchinson started walking Washington toward the patrol car, his hand gripping the chain between the cuffs. "Time for a little ride downtown, General. See how tough you are in a holding cell." Washington walked with as much dignity as handcuffs allowed, his military bearing unbroken despite the humiliation. Each step felt like a mile, each second stretched like an hour. The crowd followed, their phones creating a digital record of injustice. "Officer Hutchinson," Sarah Lane called out, jogging alongside with her microphone. "Are you confident these charges will hold up in court?" "Lady, I've been doing this for 12 years. I know it's fake when I see one." Hutchinson opened the patrol car's rear door, its metal frame squeaking like a prison gate. This man was found with stolen military property and forged government documents. Open and shut case. Washington paused at the car door, looking back at the crowd. His voice carried across the courthouse steps with the authority of someone accustomed to addressing troops. Remember what you've seen here today. Document everything. Document. The truth matters. The truth? Hutchinson shoved him toward the car seat. The truth is, you're going to jail for being a lying, thieving... That's when the phone in his pocket started ringing again. Not just ringing, practically vibrating off his belt. The caller ID was impossible to ignore now. Pentagon, General Harris. Murphy saw it first. Brad, look at the phone. Hutchinson glanced down, irritation flashing across his face. Probably another scammer trying to... The phone rang again immediately. Same number, same insistent tone. Collins, who had been silent through most of the arrest, finally spoke up. Brad, that's the Pentagon calling, the actual Pentagon. It's fake, Hutchinson insisted, but his voice carried less certainty now. These scammers program fake numbers all the time. Washington, still handcuffed and pressed against the patrol car, spoke quietly. Officer, that would be my commanding officer. General Marcus Harris, Joint Chiefs of Staff. He's probably wondering why I missed our scheduled call. The words hit the scene like lightning striking dry grass. Sudden silence fell over the crowd. Even the traffic noise seemed to fade as everyone processed what they'd just heard. Hutchinson stared at the phone in his hand, watching it ring for the fourth time. His face had gone pale beneath his sunburn, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cool morning air. Murphy grabbed his partner's arm. Brad, what if he's telling the truth? What if he really is? Shut up! Hutchinson's voice cracked like a teenage boy's. Just shut up and let me think! But thinking was becoming impossible as the phone continued its relentless ringing. Each buzz seemed louder than the last, more insistent, more impossible to ignore. Washington remained perfectly calm, his voice steady despite the handcuffs cutting into his wrists. Officer, I strongly suggest you answer that call. General Harris doesn't like to be kept waiting. The phone's fifth ring echoed across the courthouse steps like a church bell tolling Judgment Day. Murphy's eyes darted between the device and his partner's increasingly pale face. Brad, you have to answer it. Murphy's voice barely rose above a whisper. What if he's really... He's not! Hutchinson's voice cracked, but his hand trembled as he held the still buzzing phone. The caller ID glowed like an accusation. Pentagon, General Harris. Collins stepped closer, reading over Hutchinson's shoulder. That's a 703 area code. Virginia. Pentagon's in Virginia. The crowd had gone silent, every eye fixed on the three officers standing around a handcuffed man who somehow seemed more in control than any of them. Sarah Lane held her breath, sensing that history was about to unfold on live television. Washington's voice cut through the tension like a blade through silk. Officer Hutchinson, I am Major General Theodore Washington, United States Army. That phone call is from my commanding officer, and he's growing very impatient. The words hung in the air like smoke from an explosion. Murphy's face went white. Collins actually took a step backward. Hutchinson stared at Washington as if seeing him for the first time. You're lying. But the conviction had drained from Hutchinson's voice like water from a broken dam. The phone rang again. Louder, more insistent. Answer it. Washington's tone carried the quiet authority of someone who'd commanded thousands of soldiers. Please. Murphy grabbed the phone from his partner's frozen hand. I'm answering it. Collins, don't you dare, Hutchinson started. But Collins had already swiped to accept the call. He held it to his ear, his hand shaking like a leaf in a hurricane. This is Officer Collins, Richmond Police Department. The voice that erupted from the speaker was loud enough for everyone within 10 feet to hear clearly. It carried the unmistakable authority of someone accustomed to moving armies. "Where the hell is General Washington? Put him on the phone right now!" Collins jerked the phone away from his ear as if it had burst into flames. The crowd gasped. Someone whispered, "Oh my God!" Sarah Lane's cameraman zoomed in on Collins's terrified face. "Sir, he's currently..." Collins stammered. "He's currently what, officer?" Washington spoke calmly from beside the patrol car, still handcuffed. "Tell him I'm in police custody." Collins swallowed hard. "Sir, he says he's in police custody." The explosion of profanity that followed would have made a drill sergeant blush. "He's what? Who the hell arrested a two-star general?" Hutchinson's face had gone from pale to green. His legs wobbled like a newborn colt's as the magnitude of his mistake crashed down on him like an avalanche. "Put whoever's in charge on the phone. Now." Collins thrust the device toward Hutchinson like it was radioactive. "He wants to talk to you." Hutchinson's hands shook so violently he nearly dropped the phone twice before getting it to his ear. This is Officer Bradley Hutchinson, Richmond PD." "Officer Hutchinson? What is your badge number?" 2847, sir." His voice came out as a squeak. "Badge 2847, you have just arrested one of the most decorated generals in the United States Army. General Washington has top-secret clearance and is scheduled for a Joint Chiefs meeting in 3 hours. The crowd erupted in gasps and murmurs. Phones captured every moment of Hutchinson's public humiliation. A veteran in the crowd actually saluted toward Washington. "Sir, he didn't identify himself as military," Hutchinson pleaded desperately. "He's under no legal obligation to identify himself to you. He hasn't committed any crime." Washington spoke clearly from his position against the patrol car. "General Harris, I'm currently handcuffed and was about to be transported to jail." "You're handcuffed?" If Harris had been loud before, now he was thermonuclear. "Officer Hutchinson, remove those handcuffs immediately, or I'll have the FBI investigating your department before lunch." Hutchinson fumbled frantically for his keys, his hands shaking so badly he dropped them twice. Murphy had to help him unlock the cuffs that had left angry red marks around Washington's wrists. The moment the metal clicked open, Washington straightened to his full height. The change was instantaneous and dramatic-like watching a sleeping lion wake up. His military bearing, no longer constrained by handcuffs, radiated the unmistakable presence of command authority. "General Harris," Washington said, taking the phone with calm dignity. "I apologize for missing our scheduled call. I was detained while attempting to enter the courthouse. Ted, are you hurt? Do you need medical attention?" "I'm fine, sir. Just some minor abrasions from the restraints." Washington flexed his wrists, the red marks visible to every recording phone. "I'm calling the Attorney General." "This is a federal civil rights violation." The crowd had begun to murmur and point. Word was spreading through the gathering like wildfire. "He's really a general. A real general. They arrested a general." Hutchinson stood frozen, his career flashing before his eyes like a man drowning. 12 years of service, ending in 12 minutes of stupidity broadcast to the world. Collins backed away from his fellow officer as if proximity might be contagious. Murphy stared at the ground, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Washington ended the call and handed the phone back to Collins with military precision. When he spoke, his voice carried across the courthouse steps with the authority of someone accustomed to addressing troops. "Officer Hutchinson, you have violated my constitutional rights, conducted an illegal search and seizure, and falsely arrested a United States military officer on fabricated charges." The power dynamic had shifted so completely that it felt like watching gravity reverse itself. The man who'd been handcuffed and humiliated now stood like a monument to dignity, while his tormentor shrank into himself like a deflating balloon. The wail of sirens cut through the morning air like banshees announcing the apocalypse. Sergeant Rodriguez's patrol car screeched to a halt at the courthouse steps, followed immediately by two more units and an unmarked sedan that could only belong to someone very high up the food chain. Rodriguez jumped out before his car fully stopped, his face already red with the kind of fury that comes from knowing your department just stepped on a landmine. His radio crackled with urgent chatter. All units be advised. Formal complaint filed by Pentagon regarding detention of General Theodore Washington. What in the holy hell happened here? Rodriguez's voice carried across the crowd as he surveyed the scene. News cameras, dozens of phones recording, and one of his officers looking like he'd seen his own ghost. Murphy stepped forward, his voice barely above a whisper. Sarge, Hutchinson arrested a general. A real general. Rodriguez's eyes found Washington, who stood with the unmistakable bearing of military command despite his rumpled civilian clothes and the angry red marks around his wrists. Recognition hit like lightning. This was exactly what a general looked like when he wasn't trying to look like one. Officer Hutchinson. Rodriguez's voice could have frozen fire. Tell me you did not just arrest a United States military officer. Hutchinson opened his mouth, but no sound emerged. His face had gone beyond pale into a sickly gray that matched the courthouse marble. Rodriguez's radio erupted again. Sergeant Rodriguez, Chief Morrison requesting immediate return to station for all officers involved. The Pentagon has contacted the mayor's office. The crowd pressed closer, sensing blood in the water. Sarah Lane pushed through with her microphone extended like a sword. Sergeant Rodriguez, can you comment on what appears to be racial profiling of a military officer? Rodriguez removed his hat, a gesture of respect that wasn't lost on anyone present. He approached Washington with the careful steps of a man walking through a minefield. General Washington, on behalf of the Richmond Police Department, I offer my most sincere apologies for this completely unacceptable behavior. Washington's response was measured, professional, devastating in its calm authority. Sergeant, I want a full investigation and a complete report filed within 24 hours. Absolutely, sir. This will be thoroughly investigated. Rodriguez turned to face Hutchinson like a judge pronouncing a sentence. Badges, weapons, and radio, right now. Sarge, please. Hutchinson's voice cracked like a teenager's. Badge, weapon, radio, now! Hutchinson's hands shook as he unpinned his badge, the small piece of metal that had defined his identity for 12 years. The weapon came next, unholstered with trembling fingers and handed over like a surrendering soldier's rifle. Finally, the radio that had broadcast his lies to the entire department. You're suspended without pay pending full investigation. Rodriguez's words fell like hammer blows. Internal Affairs will be contacting you within hours. The crowd erupted in applause. Someone shouted, About time! Another voice called out, Justice for the General. Washington held up a calming hand toward the crowd, then addressed Murphy and Collins directly. Officers, I hope you learn from this experience. Good police work requires respect for all citizens, regardless of color or appearance. Murphy stepped forward, his young face etched with shame. General, I'm sorry, I should have stopped this. Officer Murphy, recognizing wrongdoing is the first step toward preventing it. Washington's tone carried the patient authority of someone who'd mentored countless young soldiers. Collins nodded vigorously. Sir, this was completely wrong. We know that. Rodriguez was already coordinating damage control on his radio. Chief, we need legal affairs and public relations down here immediately. And, sir, you might want to prepare a statement for the media. Washington's phone buzzed with incoming calls. Pentagon colleagues, military legal affairs, and what appeared to be half the Joint Chiefs of Staff. He answered selectively, always professional, always calm. General Harris, yes, sir. The situation is resolved. No, I don't require medical attention. Yes, I'll file a complete report. Hutchinson stood alone now, abandoned by his fellow officers, ignored by the crowd, forgotten by everyone except the news cameras that captured his disgrace for posterity. 12 years of police work ending in the most public humiliation imaginable. As he walked toward his personal vehicle, no longer authorized to drive a patrol car, the crowd's jeers followed him like ghosts. How's it feeling now? Remember this next time. Justice served. Rodriguez watched him leave, then turned back to Washington. General, the department will cooperate fully with any federal investigation. We'll also review all of Officer Hutchinson's previous arrests and complaints. Thank you, Sergeant. I trust Richmond PD will use this incident to implement meaningful reforms. Sarah Lane was already filing her report. This is Sarah Lane reporting on what may be the most dramatic case of racial profiling caught on camera this year, the false arrest of a decorated U.S. Army general. The courthouse steps, which had witnessed the ugliest kind of injustice an hour earlier, now hummed with the energy of accountability finally arriving. 48 hours after the courthouse incident, the story had exploded across every major news network in America. The video crystal-clear footage of a decorated general being handcuffed and humiliated had been viewed 8.2 million times and was climbing fast. In a sterile conference room at the Pentagon, Colonel James Mitchell spread photographs across the mahogany table like evidence in a war crimes trial. Each image captured a different angle of Hutchinson's assault on General Washington's dignity. Sir, we have 17 different video recordings from bystanders, plus the news footage. Mitchell's voice carried the precision of someone who'd prosecuted military courts-martial. Every constitutional violation is documented in high definition. General Harris leaned forward, his weathered face hard as granite. What's the Justice Department saying?
The FBI Civil Rights Division opened a case this morning. Agent Sarah Torres is lead investigator. Mitchell pulled up a thick file. She's already uncovered a pattern going back 12 years. The pattern was damning. 15 formal complaints against Hutchinson, all involving minority citizens. 3 previous lawsuits settled quietly by the city for a combined $2.3 million. Body camera footage from previous incidents that painted a picture of systemic abuse. In Richmond, the community response had reached a boiling point. The NAACP held an emergency press conference on the same courthouse steps where Washington had been arrested. Local NAACP President Marcus Jefferson's voice carried across a crowd of 300 supporters. This wasn't just one rogue cop having a bad day. This was systematic racial terrorism carried out under the color of law. Jefferson held up a blown-up photo of Washington in handcuffs. When they can do this to a general, what chance do our children have? The crowd erupted in applause and angry shouts. Signs reading, "Justice for General Washington" and "End Police Terror" bobbed above the sea of faces. Veterans had turned out in force, many wearing their service uniforms in solidarity. Local veteran Tom Rodriguez, no relation to the police sergeant, stepped to the microphone. I served 2 tours in Afghanistan with black officers who saved my life. To see one of our generals treated like a criminal makes me sick to my stomach. Inside the courthouse, District Attorney Margaret Lane, Sarah Lane's older sister, was reviewing the criminal case against Hutchinson with prosecutors who smelled blood in the water. The evidence was overwhelming, documented so thoroughly that defense attorneys were already talking plea bargains. We have him on civil rights violations, false imprisonment, official misconduct, and filing false police reports. Lane spread the charges across her desk like playing cards. Each count carries significant jail time. But the federal charges would be the real hammer blow. FBI agent Torres had uncovered evidence that Hutchinson's pattern of abuse constituted a deliberate conspiracy to deprive citizens of their civil rights, a federal crime carrying up to 10 years in prison. 3 weeks later, the courtroom was packed beyond capacity. Media credentials had been issued to outlets from CNN to BBC. The same courthouse steps where Washington had been humiliated now swarmed with reporters broadcasting live to the world. Inside, Hutchinson sat at the defendant's table looking like a man who'd aged 10 years in 3 weeks. His expensive defense attorney paid for with his wife's inheritance whispered urgent advice that fell on deaf ears. When General Washington took the witness stand in his dress uniform, the courtroom fell silent enough to hear breathing. His testimony was clinical, factual, devastating in its precision. The defendant conducted an illegal search based solely on my race, Washington testified, his voice carrying to every corner of the packed courtroom. He fabricated probable cause, filed false reports, and arrested me on charges he knew to be baseless. The defense attorney's cross-examination crumbled like a sandcastle against Washington's unshakable credibility. Every question was answered with military precision. Every attempt at discrediting met with documented facts. The prosecution played the videos. All of them. Every angle, every racist comment, every illegal action displayed on courtroom monitors while Hutchinson squirmed in his chair. The jury, 8 women and 4 men, including 2 veterans, watched with expressions ranging from disgust to outright anger. Additional victims testified about Hutchinson's past behavior. Maria Santos, a nurse, described being pulled over and searched because Hutchinson claimed she looked suspicious driving through a white neighborhood. James Thompson, a college professor, recounted being handcuffed outside his own home because a neighbor called police about a suspicious black man. Each testimony painted the same picture. A pattern of racial terrorism carried out under the protection of a police badge. The verdict came after less than 4 hours of deliberation. Guilty on all counts. The jury foreman, a white veteran who'd served in Iraq, read the verdict with visible satisfaction. Federal sentencing came 2 weeks later. Judge Patricia Williams, herself a black woman who'd faced discrimination throughout her legal career, handed down the maximum sentence allowed by law. Mr. Hutchinson, you took an oath to protect and serve all citizens. Instead, you used your position to terrorize and humiliate people based solely on their race. Judge Williams's voice carried the weight of history. Your actions against General Washington represent not just personal misconduct, but an assault on the very principles our military fights to defend. 2 years federal prison, 18 months additional on state charges, $75,000 in fines, permanent ban from any law enforcement position anywhere in the United States. The civil lawsuit settlement came next, $2.8 million from the city of Richmond. General Washington donated every penny to establish the Theodore Washington Military Scholarship Foundation, providing full college scholarships for minority students pursuing military careers. But the most significant change was systemic. The Richmond Police Department underwent a complete overhaul. Chief Morrison resigned in disgrace. New policies required body cameras for all interactions, community oversight boards, and mandatory bias training for every officer. The changes rippled outward like stones thrown in still water. 47 other police departments across the country implemented similar reforms after reviewing the Washington case. Congress held hearings on protecting military personnel from harassment. The Pentagon issued new guidelines for cooperation with local law enforcement. Officer Murphy, the rookie who'd witnessed everything, became the department's community liaison officer. He spoke at schools, community centers, and police academies about the Washington incident. I watched a good man get destroyed by prejudice, Murphy would tell audiences. I learned that staying silent makes you complicit. Real police work means protecting everyone's dignity. Collins retired early and now teaches de-escalation techniques at the State Police Academy. His first lesson always begins with the same video: General Washington standing dignified and handcuffed on courthouse steps. The final piece of justice came 6 months later when Agent Torres announced that her investigation had led to federal charges against 3 other Richmond officers for similar civil rights violations. The culture of abuse that had protected Hutchinson for 12 years was finally being dismantled, one prosecution at a time. 1 year later, Lieutenant General Theodore Washington stood at the podium in the Pentagon briefing room, 3 silver stars gleaming on his dress uniform. Behind him, a presentation screen displayed statistics that would have seemed impossible 12 months earlier. A 78% reduction in police misconduct complaints nationwide, 200-plus departments implementing reform programs, and $50 million in federal funding allocated for bias training. The incident in Richmond wasn't about me, Washington told the assembled military and civilian leaders. It was about a system that allowed prejudice to masquerade as law enforcement. Today, we're seeing that system change. His promotion to lieutenant general had come with a new assignment: Director of Military-Civilian Relations, a position created specifically to bridge the gap between armed forces and local police. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The man who'd been handcuffed for his race was now helping heal the divide that had made his arrest possible. The Theodore Washington Military Scholarship Foundation had awarded its first 47 scholarships, including one to Marcus Washington, the nephew whose court case had brought the general to Richmond that fateful morning. Marcus was now a cadet at West Point, his character witness letter from his uncle having helped secure his appointment. In a minimum security federal facility in Virginia, Bradley Hutchinson mopped floors in the pre-dawn darkness. 18 months into his sentence, he'd lost everything that had once defined him: badge, weapon, pension, family, respect. His wife had filed for divorce after the first month. His children, now teenagers, had legally changed their surnames to their mother's maiden name. The letters he wrote to General Washington went unanswered, each one returned unopened. His lawyer had advised him to stop writing them, but something about the ritual felt necessary, a small act of penance in an ocean of consequences. Meanwhile, Richmond had become a model city for police reform. The new chief of police, Maria Rodriguez, Sergeant Rodriguez's sister, and a 20-year veteran with a doctorate in criminal justice, had implemented changes that made national headlines. Use of force incidents had dropped 85%. Community trust surveys showed the highest confidence levels in decades. Officer Murphy, now Detective Murphy, ran the department's community outreach program. Every month he spoke at high schools about the Washington case, using it as a teaching moment about courage, accountability, and the difference between policing and serving. "I was there," he would tell students. "I watched a hero get treated like a criminal because of the color of his skin. I learned that staying silent makes you part of the problem." The courthouse steps where it all began now bore a small bronze plaque: "Justice for all," a reminder that dignity must never be denied. Tourists stopped to read it. Veterans left flowers. Students came for field trips to learn about civil rights in the modern era. Sarah Lane had won a Pulitzer Prize for her coverage of the story. Her documentary, One Call to the Pentagon, had been viewed 47 million times and was required viewing in police academies across 30 states. International human rights organizations cited the Washington case as proof that systemic change was possible when ordinary people refused to stay silent. General Washington kept a photo on his Pentagon desk, not of his arrest, but of the scholarship recipients at their first annual ceremony. 47 young faces, representing every ethnicity and background America had to offer, all committed to serving their country in uniform. His new wife, Colonel Lisa Martinez, often found him staring at that photo during late-night strategy sessions. "Thinking about Richmond?" she'd ask. "Thinking about the future," he'd reply. "These kids will be the leaders who make sure it never happens again." The ripple effects continued spreading. The video was shown in military leadership courses, police academies, and law schools. It had become a case study in how individual courage could catalyze systematic change. 3 Supreme Court justices had referenced it in opinions about police accountability. But perhaps the most meaningful change was invisible, in the thousands of traffic stops that ended with respect instead of escalation, in the police officers who remembered General Washington's dignity when deciding how to treat citizens, in the young people who saw that justice, however delayed, could still arrive. If you've ever witnessed injustice,
Don't stay silent. Your phone could record the next moment that changes everything. Your voice could be the one that demands accountability when systems fail. Share this story if you believe everyone deserves to be treated with dignity, regardless of color, background, or appearance. Comment below. What would you have done if you witnessed General Washington's arrest? How can we ensure this never happens to anyone else? Subscribe for more stories proving that ordinary people can create extraordinary change when they refuse to accept injustice as normal. Sometimes the smallest act of prejudice creates the biggest wave of progress. The question isn't whether justice will prevail, it's whether we'll be brave enough to document it, demand it, and never stop fighting for it. One call to the Pentagon changed everything. Your voice can too.
The story you heard today wasn't cleaned up. It was told exactly as it happened. At Black Voices Uncut, we believe that's the only way truth can live. If you felt something, hit like, comment, and your reaction, and subscribe. Every week, we bring you voices that refuse to be silenced.